Everyone feels that agentic AI is the next big thing and that they need to make haste in order to stay ahead of the curve or at least not get left behind. However, the tremendous benefits of using agentic AI also come with an increasing amount of risk, and that risk is not being discussed nearly as frequently as it should be. I'm Jane Singer, and welcome back to A Seat at the Table, where each week forward-thinking people from 176 countries and territories join me in sitting down with leaders, innovators, authors, and entrepreneurs to find out what's working, what's not, and what we might want to use in our own business. Today we're joined by the highly accomplished Michael Chua, an AI and cybersecurity strategist who advises boards and C-suites. In his new book, The Agentic AI Protocol, he discusses the very real risks every senior leader needs to consider. In this episode, Michael will be discussing the critical importance of building human intervention mechanisms into agentic flows, why data governance needs greater clarity in an autonomous environment, and blind spots that most entrepreneurs are not even aware of. So let's sit down with Michael and tighten up our data security before it's too late. So I'm excited to hear about this book. I think that the topic that you talk about is really, really interesting because right now, of course, AI is probably the biggest word that anybody's talking about, even if they're not in the tech sector, and certainly if they are in tech or in anything that, any business whatsoever, just about, there is always now some tie-in with AI. And then, of course, all the conversation around AI security. So I'm really interested to hear your point of view on this.
Yeah, the book I've written is actually a management book and not a tech book.
Okay.
Because if I write a tech book based on the same title, in 12 months' time, a lot of the implementation will have been eclipsed by yet another platform that is more powerful, more easy to use, and more interconnected.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm writing this book as a governance book for senior executives, policymakers, and tech people who has leadership ambitions and aspirations. Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about AI, and I believe most business owners are thinking of going into AI.
Yes.
But they often do not think about how are they going to manage the AI agents and the autonomy that will come along with it. So there is a difference between using AI as a chat GPT or LLM, where you ask the question and they answer. Okay, that's called reactive use of AI. Then there's semi-autonomous, where they will make certain decisions for you, but most of the time you're still guiding it. So you come to a time when you get some stability and it makes business decisions for you. And that's where you need to have very well-trained human in the loop to supervise the agents and make sure they don't run out of scope or boundaries. Of course, the design of the whole thing has to have security guardrails and other compliances to regulations and all that. Transaction logs very important. That's how the human in the loop supervise the agent to make sure they comply to all the regulations. That the transaction logs used to be capturing who, what, when, where.
Right.
But now with AI, it has to capture why and how.
Oh, very interesting.
And why and how is because of AI LLMs. And that's horrendous because the chain of reasoning has to be documented.
Right, yeah.
And this is required by the EU AI Act already. I believe that other laws that are enacted will follow the same, because as a law, you have to be very secure about things happening correctly. I believe the Vietnamese AI Act, that is recently released, probably will have that. The Singapore IMDA guidelines has that definitely, but they are guidelines, they are not lawyers, so it's optional. I'll explain. Yeah, the optionality and the effects on the market later. Then you have the ISO 42001, which also states that it has to be traceable. So the point is that everything has to be traceable, and ultimately a human being has to be accountable, not the machine. You cannot go to a state where you say that, oh, it's not my problem, it's AI.
Yes, yeah,
And
right.
then how did AI happen? You say it's a black box. No, that's not acceptable.
That's such a good point.
So the result is that you may have an autonomous system that is working in Singapore. In fact, there was one by a financial market autonomous system. It works in Singapore, and they have officers in Europe. And they say they cannot do it in Europe because the EU AI Act is mandatory. It disallows them to use it if they don't trace enough. Whereas Singapore, it is a guideline, so it's optional at the moment. But I believe it will be enacted as a law soon.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and what you're bringing up are very, very important points because, as you're saying, everybody's been having a lot of fun using ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, whichever one, DeepSeek, whichever one you prefer, or maybe using all of them. And I like playing around with it as well, and it's certainly very helpful with a lot of small tasks. But you're right, it's not 100% accurate all the time. You definitely need to have accountability, particularly when you're talking about decisions that are very weighty, right? Not just what restaurant to go to for lunch based on, oh, I'm here, what would be the nearest restaurant kind of thing. I don't want to walk because it's raining. But honestly, you're right. There does need to be governance, particularly when you are talking about, like you say, decisions that are very impactful, things that are a very long chain decision. So I think that, yes, that's really, really critical that we think about that. I mean, how can they enact that without making it to the point where it becomes so cumbersome that it's not even using the AI? Because if you have to document everything and check everything, and this has come up even in real use situations, that I've spoken about with some of the people in the apparel supply chain who are saying that, yeah, it's good to use AI, but if you have to keep checking everything back with a human being, then you've defeated some of the use of the AI. I mean, what do you see around that? How can this be applied in a way that doesn't defeat the use of AI, but at the same time, as you're pointing out quite correctly, puts in that really critical governance?
It's preparation. So when the autonomous system is developed, while it was being developed, you already have to plan how you're going to test the system.
Okay.
So while testing the system, you collect information. So while testing the system, the transaction logs are being captured. So you'll be able, under safe test conditions, determine which are the transaction logs that points to a very risky situation, right? So you tabulate them. So which means that in the production, when it's live, you're able to refer to this useful table and say that based on collected information, with this transaction data, it is risky. Let's kill it. So you press the kill switch. Now, pressing the kill switch is something else as well, because the person supervising the transaction may not be a very senior person, may be a fresh graduate, haven't worked in his life before, and now you're asking him to supervise work, right? So this person himself will be likened to be testing of the agent. He will have to go through a longer period of orientation at work. So it's unlike the traditional way where a graduate come into the office, understudy a senior, start doing simple stuff, and then start being solo by himself. So now this junior will maybe, depending on the company may be very strict about it, requiring that he has 3 months of just programming. Then he might protest it. No, I'm not going to use it in real work. Sorry, you need to learn the basics. Program without AI, without anything, just as if you are year 1 in computer science. So to be trained that they are totally conversant in programming, then the next stage is to to be able to draw bubble diagrams, data flow diagrams, and state diagrams and flow charts based on what I explained to you as a business in words. So they must be able to think in bubble diagrams. Then thereafter, they will have to follow a senior in the business, just about business, before they even do the real work. Yeah, so that is going to take a long time, and there are few obstacles here, or few disagreements here, is that companies may not want to spend that money. You know, I'm paying this fresh graduate, and then he's doing nothing productive for 6 months. Secondly, the graduate these days may not put up with that as well. They say my other friends are doing really cool jobs and hitting the ground running, and I'm just doing something akin to photocopying and making coffee for the seniors. So that may be a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that you're right to point this out. And I think that, in a sense, worldwide, perhaps more so in some jurisdictions than others, there has been a lack of accountability, a lack of training of people, not in every industry, not in every country, obviously, but as a general trend, because people, there's a cost, right, to having to invest in training people, time, right, money, things that people want to cut out in order to get to
Yeah.
greater profitability. But you're right, particularly with something that you want to be autonomous, if you're not investing in that training, if you haven't set those standards, the train could very easily jump the tracks and hit a brick wall. And certainly, you're right. There has been we have seen, let's just say, a trend towards a lack of what you might call accountability, particularly at a senior leadership level. In many instances, not in every company, obviously, but in certain instances, probably more frequently than we might like. Of saying it's not my fault, right? Blaming the system or blaming, juniors or whatever. And with AI, as you're pointing out, things can go wrong, and it can go wrong at a very fast pace. It can escalate far more quickly than if it's a human chain. So the importance of having people who are trained, who know what to spot, right, who can sort of pull the cord and stop the procedure if things look like they're going awry is absolutely critical. I mean, I think you're probably the first person who's actually brought this up in the many, many, many conversations that I've had with people about this. Surprisingly, but nobody else has really brought this up. So I think it's important that, you've not only brought it up and gotten it on the table, but you've actually written a book about it. That's huge. I mean, that book's a must read, I think, for anybody who is running an operation where they're going to be leaning on AI. Really, really, really important. Now, how do you see agentic AI changing the nature of work, as you're pointing out in your book, in the next 5 to 10 years?
All right. With the mad race for productivity, profitability, and catching up with the trends, it's inevitable that we move towards autonomy, right?
Right.
I think that is quite certain. Whether there's an AI bubble, that is financial, but the tech will persist. It's just like the .com bubble. After the bubble, the .com persists. Those with value persist. So that will continue. There's no doubt about it. What's your question again?
Yeah, no, I'm just simply asking you, what you see as the real impact on the nature of work for people, the role of a human worker once we're able to get so many
Right,
what
right.
you may call agentic uh, workers, so to speak, doing the jobs. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to be the case, and I've heard arguments in both directions of saying that it's going to take over all this work, and other people saying it's really just going to be like the next machine. I mean, computers didn't take over everything. We still have people running them. E-commerce
Right.
didn't wipe out physical retail. So every time something new comes along, there's always that narrative that it's going to wipe out everything. Um, what's your perspective?
Okay, that I remember the question now. So there's pressure to perform better. So a lot of talk about when AI comes in, a lot of people lose their job. That is true. If you keep the same quality, you're going to deliver to your customers. So if businesses will compete, so I'm using AI, somebody else is using AI, all the businesses using AI, so they'll be competing to improve the product quality, service delivery, time to market, hyper personalization, better safety conditions, etc. So it is a race. It is a race to put in more and more, to squeeze out more and more from AI. And in the process of doing that, you need the human beings. The difference is that now you need to be having really well-trained human beings. Because you can't have somebody that is not sure when to push the kill switch or not to pull the kill switch.
Right.
And also somebody in certain industries and products, that person may need to know the basics of mathematics and physics. Whereas in the past, they may get away with it. But now, if you push the kill switch, you must tell your boss exactly why you're doing it. Right? And if you can prove through basic mathematics and physics, then it is very safe to push the kill switch. So it is like the tide has come down, it's low tide, and you see everything on the beach. There's no hiding now. So the pressure to work with AI is probably higher. Applied correctly, there will be more jobs. Most people are not trained for it. And if companies are not putting conscious effort to train exactly what they need, it's going to be turmoil in the beginning. Even universities, there's one professor who mentioned in a seminar that universities should be teaching how the workplace is to be in 5 years' time and bring all the skills to the present and teach the skills in present, which is not really happening. They are not predicting and having a safe prediction and bring it back to today to teach it. So they are still teaching the essential theories, like, for instance, they might teach blockchain, finance, and so on. But these are skills that will be executed by AI mostly in the future.
Yeah, interesting perspective on it. And certainly it may be the case that there has to be, like you say, a greater chain of accountability, transparency, traceability, as to and checks along the way as to how decisions are being made, how things are being executed on, as opposed to just simply saying we're going to just program this thing and let it run. And it's going to do its thing, and we're going to assume that AI is smarter than everybody else. So let's just let that make the decisions.
So organizations has to be rewired as well. So the old organization is very hierarchical. That's needed because reaction time was quite long. So it needs time to percolate down and to go up. But when reaction and coordination time has been compressed, so the hierarchy will compress. And in fact, even if you can plot a hierarchy diagram of human supervising agents, supervising baby agents, and all that, the hierarchy is not even realistic. Right? You can conceptually plot that hierarchy, but essentially the humans will be surrounding processes, and the processes will contain the agents and the baby agents. So maybe one process you might have one manager and 2 or 3 governors, to govern the process. So that will be the structure of the future. HR will have to think of how they are going to incentivize these people, because now incentives are different because of the structure. It's no longer how many people I'm in charge of and how much headache I get. It's how well you manage the processes. So for instance, what is the incentive of pressing the kill switch? Do I incentivize them to press the kill switch? If I do, then they'll be trigger happy pressing the kill switch and getting more money. Or do I discourage them? In which case they say, don't do anything, don't ask for trouble, because if you press wrongly, you're going to be punished.
Right.
So it has to be somewhere in between, where they refer to an established chart, where they have already tested various scenarios. It won't be complete. There'll be new surprises, of course, but at least the known cases that has been discussed and agreed and put into that table, they can refer to it and safely press the kill switch and then go into the bypass manual system. Yeah. Communications in the organization is also very important. These days, if the boss tells the company that we are going AI, I think a lot of people will start applying for other jobs thinking that they'll be made redundant. So the communication has to be very clear what they want to achieve. The purpose of having AI is not just higher productivity, but a qualitative leap beyond what they are today and over what the competitors can do. So this has to be properly communicated at the micro level. The individual, they have to be convinced that they are still contributing to the organization and not just eyeballing things like a zombie. So they have to be clear about what they can contribute within the autonomous system as well.
Very, very interesting point. Now, what's the one hard question that every board of directors should ask before approving AI investments?
Well, use cases and ROI, I mean, the same old thing.
Right.
What are the use cases? Say, suppose I want to automate a little bit of my email system, right? And obviously, when you automate, there's certain improvements. Say, instead of taking 15 minutes to read my email, now it summarizes for me and blah, 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 and so on. It takes me now 30 seconds. Now, really saving 15 minutes, is it worth your thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in making using AI? I don't think so. I think summarizing AI summaries have also risks because it can summarize away critical risks, can bury it in the summary. So there's also risk. So you're spending money, gaining very little efficiency, and then increasing your risk. So the use cases must be really examined. You probably have to start with the less risky use cases and start off from there, and then plot how much return of investment you're going to get. There's no running away. It's still business as usual, whether it's AI or not. It is still business as usual.
Yeah. So basically, it's what I think what you're suggesting more or less is simply we have to look before we leap. That AI is definitely going to be part of the future of most workplaces, but at the same time, we don't want to be a fool and rush in. So it's sort of that, fine line between look before you leap and he who hesitates is lost.
Look before you leap, and also there's a lot of preparation before you get there. It's like film production. The pre-production is a very important stage where you prepare and make sure, don't put things to chance and all that. It has to be prepared before you get in. The current emergence of a lot of AI platforms give the illusion that things are changing very rapidly. It is only changing very rapidly at the application level. Now, if you look at machine learning, then deep learning, all large language models, there isn't change. There's no change in the model. The training changes, how you represent data changes, but that is very stable. It is only platforms that are getting more and more clever, helping you to achieve more with less work and more user-friendly interfaces. So that is the change. And the result of all these niceties is that the AI issue is now gradually moving into a security issue. So there are cases where certain installations of AI apps cheekily changes the configuration of your browsers. And I don't like that. No. When it changes my native stuff, I don't like that at all. And this is happening. That's besides the other security issues that is inherent because of AI. So for instance, previously, there was no such thing as prompt injection. That means modifying your prompt before it pushes it in for real, right? Before, there's no such thing because there's no such thing as prompt.
Right.
And before, if I want to hack you, most likely I have to hack your core system. I will do social engineering, phishing, and try to break into your username and password and get into your system and get into your privileged information and so on. And your database is likely to be well buried and protected in the inner layers, right? But these days, some of the things are in the peripheral. So the attack could be at the peripheral. For example, your augmented data, right, that you use may or may not be in your server. It could be somewhere else, could be less protected, not under your control. It could be tools that are out there that are so good, but written by a one-man band geek somewhere that is not well protected. And you can also create bots that create data, fake data, to say how great certain things are or how lousy certain things are. It's akin to creating rumors on the cyberspace. So hoping that the AI will capture on them if there's frequent and more of them around, then you will also get fake news or fake information and therefore wrong decisions. So there are multiple ways of breaking into your AI endeavors without breaking into the core of your system. And this is all besides the other conventional security that you have to implement in your system. There's still no running away. There's still no running away that you can run an AI over your system and it pick up a lot of holes and patches that you haven't implemented. That's besides the point. That is security 101. Now we are talking about AI security. That's a headache.
Yeah, that's really an important point to bring up that I think that people are vaguely aware of, but not as aware of as you're pointing out, which is all the security issues around it, not just the error potentiality, right, of things that are running and running without anybody spot checking along the way. But also, as you're saying, cyber crime has been around for a very long time, ever since we started to use email and e-commerce and all of that. And now, obviously, with AI, it just becomes a bigger threat, so to speak, that you could be hacked, that you could have, like you say, bots that have been trained to, maliciously attack various aspects of your system, that if you haven't thought about that in advance and put a fence around it to some degree, the potential for catastrophic risk seems to be incredibly high. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on A Seat at the Table. You really brought up a lot of interesting points. I think a lot of people listening to this have gotten to do some thinking here about how they see AI. Not that we're not going to all implement it, but that we may implement it with greater care. And certainly for anybody who is working with AI, probably worth spending a little bit of time and reading Michael's book, just making sure that you're familiar with all the possible risks and how you may want to rethink your approach to executing AI and putting in certain safeguards, not using it, but being prepared.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jane.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Michael. Always a pleasure. And again, thank you for being with us here today. Thanks for being with us here today on A Seat at the Table. If you'd like to see some of the other episodes, head on over to our podcast website at seat.fm. That's SEAT.fm. There's also a link here in the show notes. And if you're thinking that you'd like to be a guest on the show, you'll find information on how to apply there as well. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Jane Singer, and I will see you in the next episode.